On this episode of Still Loading, we're getting artsy. Hello everyone, and welcome to this new episode of Still Loading. We are continuing once again with our Summer of PS2 series, and I could not be more excited for this game. This week we are talking about the game Okami for the PS2, and with me, first time on the show, Brenna. Brenna, how are you doing today?
I'm peachy. How are you?
That's good. So, as with every guest, we've started, what is your introduction to PS2? When did you first either A, get one, or B, play one, whichever one applies?
Okay, so I'm probably an outlier here. I was born and raised with Nintendo. I started off with the GameCube.
Kirby's Air Ride? That's
yes,
your favorite.
Air Ride is the best game ever, but that's not what we're here for. I actually got a launch day Wii for Christmas. What would that have been, 2005?
Something like that.
I had a launch day Wii. I did not end up with the Wii U at that point. I was with my partner, and he ended up getting one. But my brother at some point defected to Microsoft. I had no experience with PlayStation. I actually was the asshole, and I will admit to this because my brother is 7 years older than me. He called it the gay station. Wow. And so that
original.
was...
I've never...
Yeah.
Wow, okay.
So that's where I was at, my mind was like, nope, PlayStation's dumb because I play Nintendo, my brother plays Xbox. I don't really even like Xbox that much now. But then I started dating my boyfriend, and he was born and raised on PlayStation, which was an entirely new experience for me because he would play these games, and I was like, wow, this actually is not the stupid system that I was indoctrinated to believe.
It's almost like you had a video game religion that was
It actually kind of is, because Nintendo still continues to be the only thing that really interests me in E3. I will watch Sony's for curiosity just in case there's something that interests me. Like if Bayonetta were to come out now, I would still be interested in that. If that had been just released, in my mindset now, I would have been interested in that. Xbox, at this point, it's a formality. I'll look at the list of things that were announced, but I actually care about Nintendo. So being in this mindset of PlayStation's available to me now is kind of still weird, because one of the first games that I remember seeing for PlayStation and being interested in was Okami. I was at my granny's house. I'm watching X-Play on G4 TV, which tells you how long ago this was.
It's been a while.
And I watched it, and I saw, honest to God, because I am a furry, I'm an artist, I saw a wolf on screen running around with flowers and really cool Japanese art, and was like, wow, I really actually wish I had a PlayStation.
The art style is probably the first thing that will draw anyone to this game. It is stunning. It looks
really
amazing.
Is. And it was interesting for me because I'm familiar with art in the scene. Just in the grander context, I'm familiar with the Japanese art style, and I'm looking at it like, wow, that's an incredible thing that they've done. Because in Nintendo, you see like the bright colors, like with Kirby, you see the kind of semi-realistic, but not in the same way with Zelda, and it's... Yeah. But with Okami, it was like, holy crap, this is different. And it's like they actually brought a Japanese woodblock to life. And it was an incredible thing to me. And it was the only thing that ever made me regret not having a PlayStation. And then probably a year or two after I started dating my boyfriend, I was like, wow, wait a second. He's got a PS3 and there's Okami on that?
Now you finally got to play it.
And it still took me a year or more to actually sit down and start playing it. I was off for a week while my family was on an Alaskan cruise. That was way too much money. I was not going to go for that.
Wait, so they wouldn't pay for you. You had to pay for yourself.
No, I had to pay for myself. So I stayed home. I was like, nope, I'll take the week off and I'll stay home. And he brought over the PlayStation 3. I played the HD version first. I got about, I guess, 3/4 of the way through the game. I got up to Kamui, and then for some reason I stopped. And I didn't pick it up until it came out for Switch. And it's even if with all of the experience I have with PlayStation now, it has all come back to Okami every single time.
That's the Okami is your origin point for all of PlayStation, pretty much.
Everything just comes full circle with Okami, and it's like.
So my first experience with the game, it is kind of cool how because we were talking off mic beforehand how your first experience with PlayStation was a perfect lead-in for Okami, and now that you tell me it, you're spot on. Like that's awesome. That's kind of cool how that was like your initial experience right into it.
Yeah.
So sorry.
It's also because like as a furry and as someone in the art community, I was on early 2000s DeviantArt. Well, all the furries are sitting there drawing Okami, and just constant influx. Like every couple of months ago, I'd be reminded of this game because I've got this new artist on my feed just slamming me with that beautiful watercolor art, and I'm like, wow, still really wish I had a PlayStation.
Words cannot describe how good this game looks, even to this day. So I played the Wii port of it, and the Wii port's actually pretty cool. Like before we completely dive into the gameplay and the story and everything, you get to take control of this thing called the Celestial Brush, and based off the movements that you do with the brush, whatever you draw on screen with it, it does different things in the world. So there's one that is a cut, like a slash move that'll cut through things. There's another one that's a bomb that'll then blow things up depending on where you draw it on the screen. So stuff like that. And with the Wiimote, it was kind of cool because you could actually draw those things. On the PlayStation 2 and 3, I guess you have to do it with the joysticks then?
You can do it with the joysticks. I've played the PS3 version, and I've beaten the Switch version. That was how I beat the game.
Okay.
The Switch is actually interesting because you can choose to actually draw if you're in handheld mode. I played on the TV, so I didn't really have that option.
Mm-hmm. But really? You can only draw in the handheld mode?
Well, how are you going to connected to the TV otherwise?
Like, I mean, well, doesn't it? But it has like motion controls on the Switch, doesn't it?
You do that with the Joy-Cons. You actually are completely right with that. You can play with the Joy-Cons.
That's what I thought.
I have a Pro Controller,
okay,
so
I'm
just going to use my Pro Controller right off the bat.
Okay, that makes sense then.
My hands are shaky, so the Joy-Cons don't really work for me. It's kind of what stopped me from playing the Wii version, which I do own, is that just I actually prefer the strange amount of control, but like the awareness of the shapes with the joysticks.
It does. So that probably is a good point then, because I did run into a lot of issues with the Wii version where I would make a shape by drawing it on the screen with the Wiimote, and it just wouldn't do what I told it to do because I didn't have that pixel perfect circle or the pixel perfect.
Yeah, it also happens with both versions.
It's pretty lenient overall.
Yeah.
But it does have some issues. So let's dive into it. So Okami was released on April 20th, 2006. The director of the game is Hideki Kamiya, which a lot of people know from Devil May Cry.
Bayonetta. He also worked with Resident Evil 2.
Yes.
Because Claire is referenced in Bayonetta as well as Amaterasu.
And speaking of Resident Evil, though, one of the things that he was inspired by was the GameCube port of the original Resident Evil. One of the things I looked up in an interview he did was that the director of the port, Shinji Mikami, who's also the director of the series, used the word seikon, which roughly translates to a feeling of life/aliveness. Like he wanted the port to be alive and feel like it was a real world. And Kamiya thought, well, what if they took that and made it something that's a little bit more happy? And his exact quote was glistening and beautiful. And that feeling was the root of Okami. That was his initial. That was the whole feeling that he wanted to have the player evoke in the player.
Yeah,
and I think it works. Glistening and beautiful is a really good descriptors for that game. This game,
it's so interesting because I watched a demo reel for the first prototype where they did a realistic art style, and comparatively, and I don't know if it's because of the age of the demo where it's PS2 graphics, but it does feel kind of lackluster. I think realism would not have benefited the game, even in the current state of graphics.
100%. So let's talk about the game though. We've kind of danced our way around it a little bit. But so Okami, you play as a wolf named Amaterasu.
Yeah,
that makes sense. I'm always bad at saying it. It's just the first bit because it is like the Americanized version would be Amaterasu, but like we've said before, Japanese. The U at the end of like
it's
words
so
like
fluid
that
for them.
It's almost silent.
I mean, you could call her Amy. You could take a leaf out of his son's page.
But they also call her Amy
out of his book.
they call her Amy in at least the version I did. Periodically, soon one of the other characters would call her Amy.
Yeah.
It's actually interesting. One of the things in certain ports of the game, she was either gender neutral or a female.
Mm-hmm.
I forget which ones. But no, so you play as Amaterasu, and she is a wolf who is the reincarnation of a god, correct?
Yes. Amaterasu is a Shinto goddess. Like
and
the high one.
Shiranui was the wolf that she reincarnated.
Yeah, Shiranui was the previous incarnation before... I think Shiranui dies defeating Orochi.
Yeah.
Saving Naga, I think it is.
Nagi. Yeah, so the whole premise of the game is that it's a very long introductory cutscene where it's going through the whole backstory of everything leading up to Amaterasu's, I'll just say Amy, because that's going to be a long thing to say, Amy's reincarnation. And so it goes through the whole backstory of how Shiranui, or I'm going to butcher, Shiri, we're going to call her Shiri. Hey,
I will
Shiri.
call him Shiranui because I can pronounce these things.
Hey, Shiri, how do you speak Japanese? It's a bad joke, but I'll take it.
Okay, now I'm just going to die for a second.
You're welcome. So, Shiri rescues Nagi, who is basically, there's a big evil villain named Orochi, and every year during, what's the festival was it again? There's a specific festival every year that it happens.
Is that the Moon Festival?
It's the Moon Festival, and I think the Moon Festival was created because of it. But anyway, so basically, Orochi picks a sacrifice, and basically as long as they sacrifice the individual that he picks to him, then the village gets to live in peace for another year, but they would have to sacrifice someone every single year until one year the guy had enough of it, and he goes, I can't remember the dude's name, he has Susanoo is his ancestor, which is what you meet throughout the game, but I can't remember what his original what his ancestor's name was. Do you remember at all?
Susanoo and Nagi?
Oh, it is Nagi.
Yeah.
I for some reason I thought Nagi was
he's
the
the descendant of Nagi. He's the descendant of the legendary hero.
Okay, so basically Nagi has enough and goes to fight Orochi, and he gets him drunk on the sake of
8 purification
sake. And thank you.
I'm here for you.
There's so much to remember.
There really is.
This.
There's a lot of minutia, and that's part of what overwhelms me with this, is that there's so many little details that, with all of the lore, it's actually like trying to remember mythology.
It's full Japan. Well, I shouldn't say it's full, but they take a lot from Japanese folklore. And you said you did a little bit of research on it, a lot.
I know a few things. I know Susanoo is in Shinto mythology is the brother of Amaterasu. And one of the weapons you get, I believe it's the one you get the first time you beat Orochi, is Tsukuyomi, which is that's the other sibling of Amaterasu in Shinto mythology. Oh. So they kind of took that name and incorporated it into the game. I think Tsukuyomi is... I could be wrong, but I think he's the deity of the moon, which is where the moon motif on the sword came from.
Okay. So I feel like I'm jumping all over the place with the story. Yeah. I'm going to try to make it more concise right now. 100 years prior, Shiranui and Nagi go fight Orochi. Nagi is a legendary swordsman. Shiranui is a wolf. They defeat Orochi and saving the village and saving this horrible trend from happening. But in doing so, Shiranui dies. Does Nagi also die? I don't think he dies.
Nagi does not die because he was motivated by love for the sacrifice for that year.
That's what it was.
And that's why he's like, nope, I want this girl, so I'm gonna kill this eight-headed dragon, because that's a totally rational thing to do for love.
Well, yeah. But the bigger question is, why the fuck didn't he do it beforehand?
Wow, we can drop F-bombs here? Cool.
Oh, yeah.
All right, good to know.
Oh, yeah, no, swearing's 100% okay on the show.
Rad.
So 100 years later, which is what the present of the game is, somebody, you don't know who yet, steals the sword that Nagi used to kill Orochi with,
Out of the moon cave.
Out of the moon cave, which is where they fought 100 years prior.
Mm-hmm.
And in doing so, reawakens Orochi for reasons. Actually, they do kind of explain that,
because the sword is sealing Orochi into the
the
cave.
sword is sealing Orochi, and he unleashes the evil all over the world again. And so now, since Shiranui dies, she has to be reincarnated as the character you're playing, Amaterasu.
Yeah, it's weird because Shiranui, I think, at least in the English ports, Shiranui is a male, but Amaterasu is female. But that's just a thing.
Realistically, it doesn't matter to the plot of the story at all.
Yeah, it's reincarnation at any rate. So reincarnation has no rules.
It just happens.
Yeah, but the statue of Shiranui is where is Sakuya wakes it up, and then it becomes Amaterasu in a weakened state, mind you.
And Sakuya she's a goddess, right? Or is she just
tree sprite.
That's what it is.
She's the tree sprite of the
village.
Yeah.
And I actually write down the village? I did. Kamiki Village. So Kamiki Village is where the whole game starts, and you awaken as Amaterasu now, awakened by the wood sprite of the village, like you said, Sakuya, and that's where the game starts.
Yeah.
And it goes through the first area you play is through the Celestial Plane, which is this really cool space-like type of atmosphere. It's where all the tutorials are to get you to
go back
to get you
the,
used to the controls and everything. And then you end up in the village, Kamiki Village, and you're given the task by Sakuya to say, "Hey, Orochi's back. Go stop him."
Yeah, save Nippon, please.
Yeah, all of Japan, Nippon. And that's the plot of the game. That I know we kind of danced around it a little bit, but that's the essential. That is
it's the meat
inciting incident of the whole story. And so you have to go, so you play as Ami or Amaterasu, and you go through different zones, and you have to find a way to defeat Orochi. But in doing so, since his evil is spread all over the place, you have to cleanse the land as you go along. And there is something about games that are able to invoke the purpose of the game with the story through its gameplay. And it'd be one thing if you just go from point A to point B, you heal whatever's there, and then you healed that area, right? Yeah. You do that. But when Ami runs, there's actually grass and leaves and flowers that sprout up behind her as she's running. It's a really pretty and very stunning bit of animation that it does, but in the gameplay itself, it's showing that her whole purpose is to bring life, help the planet become reborn again, or Nippon come back to life. And so even in just traveling, in just pure travel, it shows her entire purpose in that travel, which I think is a really cool thing to do and to start out right off in the beginning of the game.
Yeah. That was one of the first things that I noticed was, ooh, pretty flowers. Ooh, the wolf's animation is really fluid. Ooh, this is just really, they're gold now, and I'm going really fast. It was just such an excellent bit of animation. Just the movement animations alone are so smooth, and they just work. That was something that really caught my eye the minute I got a hold of the character. Once I got the controls, I just started running in circles because just that little bit right there had mystified me.
And I was really worried that, because there is combat in this game, you do have to fight as the wolf, as Ami, in order and fight demons. And I was really worried how combat as a wolf was going to work out, but it's surprisingly simple. I mean, it's surprisingly good. I wouldn't say it's perfect, but in general, it wasn't it was fun. You felt in control of the character. The controls, at least on the Wii version, were great. What is it like on the non-Wii version, the non-motion controls? Because on the Wii version, you actually have to shake the Wiimote to attack. I'm assuming you just hit square or circle or something.
It's a lot of button mashing. The controls for fighting, I imagine that they are, you probably can do combos. It's in essence a platinum game because it's the same people that did games like Devil May Cry and Bayonetta. And you can feel that in the fact that there is some complexity there, but you can also choose not to bother. There's the grading system, but compared to other games that Kamiya has done, it is a lot more forgiving, especially in terms of time, not so much with the damage. The big issue that I had with the combat is more with some of the demons, the way you defeat them is either not super clear or just takes forever when you are not playing the combat quote unquote the way it should be done.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I talked to you about how frustrating some, like, the lack of information that was given to you in order to beat some of the bosses specifically. But you're right, some of the characters or some of the enemies, excuse me, are not very intuitive. A lot of them, as you get along, you're supposed to learn take what you learn from previous enemies and use them for boss fights. I remember you were telling me one specifically that you were frustrated by. I think was like I didn't write down the name of the bosses. He was like a red suit of armor.
Crimson Helm.
Crimson
Helm, yeah, because you get the feedback that he's not taking damage, and that leads you, all right, well, what do I need to do now? Because you get when you attack him, you get the kanji coming up that it's, all right, well, he's impervious the way I'm hitting him.
So the reason I was able to figure him out was because even though his damage, the kanji would come up that he was not taking damage, and you also would see his health bar, but he would still flash. He would flash like he was getting hit, but not losing damage.
Like,
so
I
in other
never
bosses,
saw
they
that.
won't flash. Because previous enemies, and there's a lot of enemies in this game.
There's
a lot
are.
And they're pretty unique. Some of them are flying, and you have to cut their wings off. But I guess one of the things we should definitely talk about in terms of before we go into the whole story, which we'll tell an
This
abbreviated.
might be a long episode.
we're going to tell an abbreviated version of the story because I'm going to tell you now that game was way longer than it needed to be.
I disagree with needed to be. I think that the whole story could have been truncated a little bit.
Yes.
But I also don't feel like it was too much, but I know that I am also an outlier in that I know a couple of people that stopped after beating Orochi the first time because they're like, all right, I beat Orochi, that must be the end of the game and this is all post-game. Nope, you've still got more to do. And if you pay attention to the cutscenes, you can see that is alluded because Orochi's like essence of darkness goes somewhere else. And all of the other bosses do that as well, but it was more like it's the way it's built up.
I would say my biggest issue is that it's essentially the game is split up into 3 separate sections. Not equal sections, they're not equal portions. I would say the first 2 are about 45% of the game, and then the third is like the first 2 are like 40% of the game, and the last portion is like 20%. I'm just kind of ballparking it, but you spend a lot of time in the first couple areas leading up to the defeat of Orochi. Then you spend a lot of time in the next couple areas leading up to the defeat of, which I once again did not write down these boss names.
Was that Ninetales?
Yes, Ninetales. And then, which made me think of Naruto, of course.
Yeah.
And then
I think of Pokemon because I am cultured.
Oh yeah, I should have. I played Pokemon before I ever saw Naruto, so that should have been the first one for me too. And then the last section is where you actually defeat like the whatever evil. It doesn't really give much of a name to it, does it? It's just the
I think
evil.
it's just called Yami.
Yeah, that's it. Just darkness or something like that.
The Lord of Darkness is what Ninetales calls him. Ninetales calls him the Lord of Darkness, and it's actually, I will agree with you there. That's actually seems to be misled a little bit because Ninetales talks like she is the Lord of Darkness in a couple of cutscenes, and that threw me off because I thought, and I think that's probably why I stopped in getting into Kamui was, all right, I've beaten Ninetales. Haven't I beaten the Lord of Darkness? And then, no, there's still more. That's the point where I think there was possibly too much of the game.
And I think if they would have put that third section more into the second section before Ninetales or changed Ninetales to whatever Yami was supposed to be, I think it would have been, or maybe still kept Ninetales because it's still a fun boss fight.
Ninetales is probably my favorite.
It's a good boss fight. But there's just so many different enemies to choose from, and there's so many different ways to defeat them, because as you explore through the game world, and essentially they talk about you need to save Nippon, which is just Japan. Nippon, it just means Japan in Japanese. And you have to go through the game world, and the wood sprite from the Kamiki village at the start of the game, Sakuya, says I've spread my roots all over. And if you can heal these trees, you will then help cleanse the land of the darkness or from the evil that's spread there. And so the first place you go to is Shinshu Field, and fields, excuse me. And there's one tree in there, but in almost every area there is like one giant open field, for lack of a better term, but it's not always called, as we see here, Shinshu Field. You have one off-put area, which is kind of like a dungeon. It's their version of what a dungeon would be. And so, for example, the one that's connected to Shinshu Field is Hana's Valley. And then when you go to the next place, you have Agata Forest. And the one off of that, I believe, is... it's not Taka Pass. It's some
shrine.
It's a shrine.
The dungeon of there. I don't remember the name of the shrine. It starts with an A, but I don't remember what it is.
And each shrine / corresponding field area, for lack of a better term, has a tree that you can heal.
Yeah, a guardian sapling.
That's it, a guardian sapling. And thank you. I'm glad you get all these terms. These terms that I can't remember. I wrote down a bunch, but you can even see here, I wrote down almost a full page and a half of terms. And I'm still forget. I didn't write the bosses down. I didn't write any of the enemy names down, because I figured that wasn't that... Bosses I should have written down. The enemy
bosses
names,
maybe, but enemies not so much. There's
like
many
15
or
20 of them, which they're all pretty unique and interesting. But anyway, so as you progress through the game, you heal the guardian saplings to then get rid of darkness in that area, and now that place is all nice and happy looking.
And the darkness is a literal thing, because when
you can step in it, but it starts eating away at your health.
Yeah, you will literally end up dead. And that's the interesting thing, was that there was that visual marker of, oh, this is not good. Like, there's something definitely going on here. Like, there was that sense of, I need to fix this. And then once you get to the guardian sapling and you bloom the guardian sapling, you get this really actually rather rewarding cutscene of spreading life back across the land and driving away the darkness. And that's really something, cool. Like, trailing back to the original concept, that if they had done that in a realistic setting, that would not have come across the same way.
No. And they kind of picked almost like what is that artist that did like the tidal wave? I can never remember it. You know what I'm talking about?
I know exactly what you're talking about, but I don't remember the
artist's name. It's not necessarily that, like, it kind of is drawn in that style almost. Mm-hmm. I cannot remember.
It's Japanese woodblock. Hokusai.
That's it. It kind of reminds me of that.
Yeah, it's a mix of woodblock and watercolor, because there's definitely it's not strong.
I would say the colors are kind of watercolorish, but then the brush strokes are very woodblock.
It's very woodblock. There's a lot of the Japanese brush strokes are a very strong influence, and you can see that in every single model in the game. And that's actually It's such an interesting feel, because when you bring that into 3D, and the fact that they made that work still
there's a couple spots where I can see like the seams, but overall it looks stunning.
And you see that even on Amateras's model. It's like, wow, they took a painting and somehow made it into an actual thing that moves.
And makes it work.
Yeah. That's the thing. Like, you would really expect that there would be somewhere on Amateras's model where the brush strokes just don't work. There's a few points at best where they crimp a little weird, but the fluidity on that is actually really impressive for what they tried to do.
The only times I can see the seams are when it's very clear that the trees are probably 2D models, like flat 2D things, and all they do is that they make it so they are constantly facing you.
Yeah, so
they're constantly facing the screen. So they track you, so that tracking your camera movement, so you're never actually getting to look around behind it. Mm-hmm. So there is moments that it kind of looks a little strange, but overall it doesn't look bad. Like, and even when it looks strange, it doesn't like take you out of the immersion. Yeah. It still keeps you in there.
There's a certain forgiveness with with cell shading that is not there for other kinds of art styles. The artistry of the game was very deliberate and very calculated, and it continues to hold up for
100%.
a 13-year-old game. That's really impressive.
I know, right? I think actually, you know what? We should move on to the actual gameplay.
Yeah.
We talked a little about the combat and some of the bosses, and we're kind of going to go through the story with the gameplay because it kind of goes hand in hand.
Yeah.
Because as you progress through the game, you have normal attacks and you have different weapons that you can use, and it determines you usually get different weapons from defeating different bosses. You can also buy them from the store.
There are a few that I think you have to buy. I think there's one of each type with the glaive, the rosary, and the reflectors. There's one of each that you buy.
The glaive was my least favorite.
I don't like the glaive. I think it's slow. My boyfriend likes it, as I remember. I was in on the rosaries the entire time because
mine too.
Because the rosaries make it that you could keep at range.
And it hits fast.
It hits fast. It hits a lot. It's honestly, I think I like it because it's rewarding, because you can just sit there and just pin them with a whip.
And then you also see the combo go up, 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 up. So I remember one time I was practicing on it, like the test dummy in the martial arts dojo type of thing. And I got up to like a 99 combo on it, which was super satisfying to get, even though the test dummies doesn't do anything to them, but it was still cool to do.
What I liked with the rosaries the most was if there were a flock of like 4 green imps, it would end up tracking pretty easily to all 4 of them. Like if you defeat an enemy, boom, you're right there to the next one, because the swing of the rosary swings across the field. So you actually can end up, if you're fighting 4 small enemies and a couple of bigger ones, you can wipe those small ones out without even moving Amethyst at all. And that helped me, because it just was like, all right, let's get these little piddly ones out of the way. And then let's focus on the actual thing that I need to pin in the corner and wail on.
I also like that the enemies don't scale as you get more powerful. So if you go back to the first area, it's like a hot knife through butter. That's the expression I was looking for.
Stomping right over them.
It's great. But if you go to the final areas, you actually have a bit of a challenge going on there. So
it's a game that grows with you.
Besides those different weapons you can get, there's you said the basic shield, the rosary, and then the glaive, and then there's like the reflector, which I think you can only use as like a shield, right?
The reflectors, there's main weapons and then there's sub weapons. The main weapons, the first one you get is the solar reflector, and that's the first class of weapons where it's
that's what it is. The main weapon is a reflector. That's what it's called. Okay, so what I called a shield is actually called a reflector. Okay, cool.
If you equip any of the ones as the main weapons, the reflector gives you a couple of fast, harder hits. The rosary is going to whip with a lot of smaller hits. The glaive does slow, but very powerful. They're really swords, but I don't know why they call them glaives. That's just a thing. But there's also the sub weapons.
Isn't glaive another word for a sword?
I think it's a different type of. Isn't a glaive a polearm?
That's what I thought. Yeah, it's glaive.
A glaive is a polearm, which is why it's weird that they called them that.
Yeah, but, I just look. It is just a polearm.
But in the interest of clarity, I'm sticking with what the game calls them.
No,
they
call
US
it a glaive.
But the sub weapons change the way they react. The reflector is equipped as a sub weapon. This might be what you're thinking of. Is equipped as a sub weapon. They act as a shield. Where if you hit that sub weapon input, that's a shield. If you use the rosary, it's literally just going to effectively shoot bullets at the enemy, which was admittedly kind of fun.
It's kind of awesome.
I'm going to be honest, because I never equipped glaives as a sub weapon, I don't actually know how they work.
I never used sub weapons ever in my playthrough.
Yeah, occasionally I'd shoot bullets, but I kept with the main ones, but it was occasionally pretty fun just to boom, pew, 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 pew.
And then along with those different weapons, there's a bunch of different versions of them. You can upgrade each one once with gold dust, which is very expensive.
So why? Why wouldn't you wait?
Exactly. So you just wait. And they would even say, well, don't, just because you upgraded one doesn't mean there's not going to be one later that's more powerful. They specifically tell you that early on. But besides the weapons that you get that you can upgrade, like I said, you also get the Celestial Brush techniques, which can also be used for attacks. There's a bunch of different ones. The first one you get is just cut, if I remember correctly, which is you just draw a line across the screen, and whatever is in that line, then it cuts it. If it's a tree, it actually cuts the tree in half.
The first one you get, I think, is restoration, which is
no, you're right. It is
when
restoration.
you restore the river of the heavens to.
So it's interesting because some of the brush strokes, you get 3 different uses for it as you progress through the game, and restoration is one of them. One's restoration, then you get bloom, and then you get the lily pad one from a different version of the same god later on. So that's just drawing a circle on the screen. You draw a circle for restoration. You draw a circle to make the trees bloom, which would heal the saplings that we're talking about, which causes the land to heal. And you also can draw a circle later on. You don't get it right off the bat, but you draw a circle on the water, and it gives a lily pad for you to stand on. Because otherwise, you can only swim for a finite amount of time before you drown.
The only one you start with is sunrise, which is Amaterasu is the sun god in Shinto mythology, so they kept with that.
Which makes sense. And you draw a circle in the sky.
And then it's daytime. It's actually kind of odd because you don't get, I think it's called moonrise, but I could be wrong. You don't get the opposing one for nighttime until like halfway through the game.
And then you just draw just a crescent moon. Basically a parenthesis right there, but it's a crescent. It makes sense. It's a crescent moon.
Yeah. The only ones that are the only full set that you get, I think, in the game through the gameplay is, the Hanagami trio,
which is the
flower ones.
Flowers.
Bloom, I think they call them green sprout.
Restore, bloom, and I forget what it is.
It's bloom, lily pad, and vine.
That's it.
Those 3, because restoration was it's not Narigami. It's the dragon in the scroll. So that one's on its own. You go through Hana Valley to get which means Flower Valley. Hana means flower because I know that. Because Hanafuda, which is what Nintendo started off making, that's flower cards. So I when I saw Hana Valley, I was like, okay, Flower Valley. And then that's where you get Bloom.
Ah, that makes sense. I see.
Because you have to go sunrise on the wall. That opens up the pathway. You get Bloom, and then you reawaken the Guardian Sapling.
You'd think someone who took 4 semesters of Japanese would remember that Japanese? Nope, not even the slightest.
I've not taken any Japanese. I just like Hanafuda.
And you remember more than I do. But so you get a bunch of other powers, of course, besides Bloom and Lily Pad and Restore. You do get a Vine one, but you don't draw with a circle. You actually draw a path from a specific point on the screen. Usually it's a flower. Usually it's like a bloomed flower, and you draw that to Amy, and then it'll shoot her up to there, and you can stand on top of it.
Konohana blossoms is what they're called.
Konohana blossoms?
Yeah.
Okay. You get that. You also get a bunch of different wind moves. You end up getting one like that's kind of in the same vein as the Bloom ones, where there's 3 different versions of it. You get a wind, you get a tornado, and you get I think the third one is the Gale Storm, which helps you. One of them lets you travel, I believe.
That is the offshoot of Water Spout.
That's what it is. Okay. So a lot of the different
Whirlpool,
a lot of the that's it. A lot of the powers have additional powers that you can get, but they're optional.
Yeah.
I believe the only one that's a triple that you have to get is like what you said, the 3 different flower ones.
Is Green Sprout. That's the only 3 that you have to get to complete the game. Everything else is optional.
But you almost get them all anyway just by it's not hard to get them. Just by
exploring the game. There are a few, like you can miss Inferno and you can miss Deluge. Because those you actually have to go out of your way and complete a couple of side quests for. But if you're just going around talking to everyone, the game actually doesn't make it too hard to get all of them. I think there were 2 that I had to look up, but I'm the kind of person that's going to explore everything.
And actually, in speaking of that, another little fun fact, Kamiya wanted players to enjoy the game slowly. He specifically said players are not going to enjoy this game. I'm paraphrasing, mind you. This is I'll let you know when it's a quote. That they need to explore the world and help the villagers, and that the game wouldn't be as fun if they didn't just take their time through it. So I think it's a very important thing, because that the game does benefit from the slow and steady pace of it. I mean, granted, towards the end of it, I was getting fed up. I'm like, I just want to beat this fucker. Let's go. I'm tired of this.
Yeah, I had one tiny little sprint at the end, but I just checked it. My playthrough was, my final results was 50 hours, 1 minute, and 37 seconds. I could have just shaved 1 minute and 37 seconds and had a beautiful, perfect 50. But alas, such things never happen.
I mean, yeah, the game, to be clear, you can beat that in about 20 hours less than Wedgie.
Yeah. I like to run around. I would guarantee at least like 20 minutes of that is just running around in circles, enjoying the animation.
We've said before, the art, we cannot express enough how beautiful this artwork is. What are some of the other powers that you get, though? So we've talked about Slash already. We've talked about the 3 Blossom, the 3 Bloom abilities.
We've got Green Sprout.
We've talked about Water Spout,
Water
where
Spout.
you pretty much draw a line from a source of water to wherever you can on the screen, and the water will travel along that line. It's usually used to put fires out, as well as fill up different objects like buckets or wells or things like that.
There was Catwalk with Kabegami.
Yes.
Catwalk was kind of a mixed bag because it was interesting because the 13 celestial brush gods they're the zodiac +1. And a common lore is that the cat was supposed to be one of the zodiac, but the rat forgets to tell her that they're making the zodiac animals on this day, and the cat gets forgotten. So that's kind of plays into the cat up on top of Cat Call Tower, just alone and forgotten. So
that's a long way to get up there too.
Oh my God,
it takes a long time.
Such a pain.
It takes such a long, but it's required for the game. You have to get that ability. So what the catwalk ability does is that whenever you see a cat statue, you use a celestial rush and you draw a path from that cat statue up a wall or along a wall or wherever. And you are able to stick to the wall when you jump onto it on those specific spots where you drew the path. And then you have to get up there. You have to climb up from there. Climb up the tower from there. And Cat Call Tower, or the Cat Tower, is just fucking huge.
Yeah, it
takes an easily 5 minutes alone just to climb up, which doesn't sound like a lot, but in a game that's agonizing.
Yeah, it's a lot, especially for someone like me who's afraid of heights. I was
Even
like,
in games,
oh,
man.
Wow, I don't like that at all. I don't like this. I don't trust like this.
Even in games, I get a little bit of that. I get a little.
We were saying that the other day. Like, I can't imagine doing something like that in VR. Like,
No.
nope, I'm out.
Fuck that. No, absolutely
I'm
not.
good. The Celestial Rush techniques are Sunrise, Rejuvenation, Power Slash, Green Sprout, which is the 3 of those, Cherry Bomb, Water Spout, Crescent, Gale Storm, Inferno, Veil of Mist, Catwalk, Thunderstorm, Blizzard, and then Guidance was Okami Den.
Veil of Mist is probably my favorite because it slows time down, and I use that a lot. And they do a lot of creative puzzle solving with the Veil of Mist one
really
too.
do.
I enjoy the puzzles in this game are actually pretty creative.
What I appreciate about Okami, and I know that I know that some people I've talked about it with disagree with me. I like that there are reasons to go back to Shinshu Field or to go back to Hana Valley, because when you get other abilities, like when you get Power Slash 1, 2, and 3, you can slash through like stone and then like crystal and then like super crystal rocks.
Where do you get the other Power Slash abilities? I didn't unlock all those.
Okay, so
because there's rocks that I couldn't cut at the end of the game. I'm like,
yeah,
oh, okay.
You're about to hear me unload because they are such a pain to get because you have to go through the Devil Trial Gates. There's one in I think it's northern Royoshima where there's a cherry bomb that you have to go down. And you have to go through a Devil Trial Gate, but it's like super intense. It's like 10 different levels of way too many enemies that are way too powerful. I think...
And the Devil Gates are the little like, what are the Torii Gates, right?
Yeah, they're like corrupted Torii Gates where you walk through them and it brings you into the battlefield, and it's a mini challenge in the rest of the game. But
real quick before you go on, another little fun fact I looked up specifically to the Torii Gates. Your Power Slash was originally able to go through the Torii Gates, but, and I quote, they thought, Kamiya thought, should a goddess really be doing that? And that's why they got rid of it. Anyway.
What an odd comment.
There's a lot of weird stuff on this interview I found, but go on, sorry.
But no, throughout the game, you'll find these little devil gates that you need to go through. You'll purify little extra bits of the land, get more praise. but there are a couple of hidden places. There's one in northern Royashima, and there's one in Kamui, where you go through this, like, super hardcore, like, ultra mega Devil Gate challenge. And I think it took me almost an hour to do both of them. And actually, it's analogous to, that's probably not how you pronounce that. Analogous. That's probably not how you pronounce that, but okay. You go through, in Bayonetta, there's the angel challenges, where it's like Platinum's official challenge to you, where you have no items, you have to do a certain type of task. Oh, that was originally done in Okami. The only difference is, for some reason in this game, they were merciful enough to give you use of the items. So if you come in with a bunch of healing items and you come in with a bunch of exorcism scrolls,
makes it pretty
you can cheese it a little bit. I tried to do it the official way, but they're like, if I saw 3 ogres on screen where you have to get those masks off, no, I was doing that with exorcism slips.
There's some of those enemies late game are super obnoxious to kill. It's not,
because they just take
they're
so
not
long.
even, it's not even, I don't even mind that. It's the fact that you have to find, it's so hard to get their weakness to actually become, like, even if you know what their weakness is, to get their weak spot exposed, it's just obnoxious to do.
Yeah, and then think about doing the challenges where they're like super ultra buffed up. It was brutal. I remember at the end of it, I'm like, wow, I really don't want to do this, but you can't leave and then come back and then keep going.
Because then you have to do it all over again.
Exactly. It's an endurance challenge. It was a mess. Everything else, you end up, you get it through side quests or coming back to an area and talking to someone. And with those, it's like, no, you have to go out of your way. You have to earn the power slashes. But I did it. I got all the brush techniques for whatever little that's worth.
I technically got all the brush techniques, but I didn't upgrade the power slash to everything. Yeah. So I guess
I got all of the upgrades because I also got all of the stray beads. I was the fool that did that.
Like there are 100 of them in the game, right?
There are 99, and then you get the 100th for beating the game.
It's just, that's so much.
It was absurd.
Is there any? Do you know if there's like a hidden ending for doing all that, or is it no?
What you get is you get a it's called the string of beads, where it's an item that you equip on the side that then you do like 10 times damage and take no damage.
Oh
so
my
it's
God,
literally
that's kind of awesome.
Yeah, it just breaks the game on New Game Plus. That's
kind
actually
of great,
all it
though.
is.
That's kind of awesome. Just rewarding players with more fun. Well, I guess it's not rewarding players with more game, but it's actually giving them a really good item for New Game Plus, so you can just go through and breeze through everything.
So you could actually just choose to enjoy the story at that point.
And let's talk about the story now.
Oh boy.
So the story is surprisingly complex and simple all at the same time. It's very strange.
I agree.
There's a lot of characters, which is what makes it complex, but the overarching story is Amy fights Orochi and beats Orochi the same way that was beaten prior. Then you go to a new portion of the world and you go fight Ninetales, who's now the new big evil in that section. And then you go to Kamui, which is the final area of the game, and you fight Yami, which is like the Lord of all darkness.
Yeah, on the Arc of Yamato.
You find out pretty much that all of the darkness in the world is spawned from Yami. So Ninetales spawns from Yami, Orochi spawns from Yami, and it all came to pass because there's this thing called the Arc of Yamamoto. The
Arc of Yamato.
Yamato, sorry, not Yamamoto. That I think he's a dude he was one of the generals in World War II, I'm pretty sure. Anyway, the Arc of Yamato, and that's where actually the celestial god, like there was a big, the darkness was fighting the celestial gods and destroyed
on the celestial plane,
and they tried to escape only to find that there was more darkness on the Arc of Yamato. Yeah. They all get killed with the exception of one person who throughout the game is this guy named Waka, which I always thought of Final Fantasy X.
There are spoilers in this episode, in case you couldn't tell.
There's always going to be spoilers. That is something that you find out at the very end of the game, technically. So it's also a 13-year-old game.
I know. I'm really just joking, but I'm like, maybe we should mark this as spoilers. And I'm like, why would you listen to an episode of a game you haven't played? That's your fault. You played yourself.
I should probably just include in my description warning, always spoilers, all the spoilers all the time, or something like that. But no, so you find out that the only celestial that survived survived is Waka, and I don't think he's even a Celestial, is he?
No, he is.
Is he actually
Straight
a
up a
Celestial?
Celestial. He doesn't look like it because he's wearing a wig.
Yes, and you find out he's blonde.
I know. I hate him blonde. I
He doesn't
didn't
look good
like
blonde.
that at all.
And so yeah, so he's a Celestial, and all of the darkness came from Earth because of the Ark of Yamato crashing. So pretty much the whole game is you defeating all the evil, and
Driving
just
it back to the
driving it
Ark.
back into the Ark, and then you defeat it one more time. And that's the story in a very condensed nutshell.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of interesting supporting characters that you meet along the way. The main supporting character is Isun. And Isun is kind of a dick.
Yeah, you can't see it, but I rolled my eyes.
Yeah, so Isun is this tiny little man. He almost looks like a flea, but he's actually a human being. Well, he's not a human being, but he's I forget what his species is.
Oh wow, why can't I remember what
Right?
they're called? Yeah, we should probably look
But
this up.
Isun is a very, very, very tiny little man, and you find out later that he is pretty much he's a Ponkel.
Ponkel.
That's
yeah.
what it is.
No, because it's from Punkton.
So he is supposed to be like the envoy to the
Celestial Envoy, yeah.
the Celestial Envoy. And so Ponkels are responsible for being the Celestial Envoys, which are supposed to assist the Sun God, Ami, or Shiranui, or whichever incarnation of it is,
By spreading faith.
by spreading faith about them.
Yeah.
And Isun doesn't want to do that, and he's also kind of a perv. Not kind of, very
Not
much.
kind of. That
Very
is
much a
not.
perv. So, fun. So another thing that I looked up, Isun was not part of the original plans for the game, but during staff discussions during development, they came to the question of what would be a good character for the guide role, who would guide Ami to the next section, and their answer was someone tiny, no bigger than a flea, foul-mouthed and lecherous. And that's in quotes.
Yeah, that's
someone.
pretty
that's-
much exactly what happened.
Yep. And I want to theorize that he is the brainchild of the producer, which is Atsushi Inaba, because another quote from Inaba was he thought his favorite character was the priestess Rao, who, spoiler alert, you find out later is Ninetales the demon. Well, Rao was killed and possessed by the Ninetales demon.
Ninetales stole her form, I think,
Pretty much. But he liked Rao because
because she's stacked.
Yep, he said he thought she was funny because it's a Buddhist priestess that has a huge bust. Now that's not an exact quote, but then he said he says he remembers someone exclaiming, "Even Isun gets excited." And I remember reading that. I'm like, well, no shit. He's a pervert. He literally gets excited over anything.
Yeah, he
The
spends
entire
like
game.
a good chunk of his time in Sakuya's dress, which is creepy
and
as
he,
hell.
And he that's where he starts out at, and she doesn't even say anything. It's like it's just that's just what you do.
Yeah.
And it'd be less weird if it was the fact that she was just in on it. Like maybe they were lovers or something. I mean, whatever. He's an inch high person. You whatever floats your boat.
No, she doesn't like that.
Wood sprite, but she doesn't like it. And he's not. It's not endearing. It's not even like the pervert thing doesn't bother me as much as it would someone who actually it would affect. But like it was annoying. Like it wasn't funny to me.
It got in the way. Honestly, it was such an overt part of his character that it was just like, even as a woman, like, I don't care, like, you want to have the feelings that you do, don't be a dick to people about it. It was his all-consuming mentality that really just
an
was
asshole.
annoying.
Even if you remove the perviness, he was just an asshole half the time. He was yelling at everyone all the time. Like I think that makes him a better guide character because of the way he kind of turns around at the end.
Yeah,
but
I guess.
it was a little overdone because it felt like every conversation he was screaming.
Yeah.
And thank
pretty
God
much.
there wasn't actually voice acting for any of this. It was all just kind of like gibberish sounding for people speaking.
They took voice clips and scrambled them.
Like I'm thankful for that because if there was a voice actor reading the lines the way it was written, it'd be obnoxious.
Yeah,
it'd be someone screaming
it
all
would
the time.
be really, really just also just kind
I
of
just think of it as like
smarmy.
Toad from the Super Mario Super Show. That's the voice I hear, but make Toad a pervert. And there you go.
Oh no,
Pervert
I
Toad.
don't like how accurate that is. I don't like that.
That's how I hear it, man. Like that's what he sounds like.
No.
I'm trying to think if I have any other, I do have a couple other I have like one other small tidbit to include, but we can get to that towards the end of the episode, towards the end of our talk. But the other characters that we have not talked about yet, Isun is the lecherous guide. Sakuya, we already mentioned, she's the tree sprite who kind of helps
Spread
reincarnate.
her roots through Nippon as a guardian spirit, I think.
Susanoo is the hero that redefeats Orochi, and he is the descendant of Nagi, who defeated Orochi 100 years ago. Queen Himiko is the queen of Seion City, which it's actually a pretty cool city. It's a big city.
Seion's pretty cool.
You get to explore the city, and
it has excellent music.
It does.
It has such a good music track. I listen to that just sometimes at work. It's so good.
And she's very much aware of all the evils going on and tries to stop it. Spoiler alert, she does get killed, which is kind of a bummer because she was a really cool character.
I know.
She was a good character. Priestess Rao, she, like, you could kind of tell that, like, that wasn't really the priest. Well, I didn't know that she was possessed, but I could tell that there's something fishy about her at first.
I can't see a plot twist coming from, like, 2 inches in front of my face, so that kind of blindsided me. But looking back on it, I'm like, oh, yeah, I can see why other people that are more, like, eyes open than me.
I'm not normally perceptive, but that one stuck out to me.
That's my boyfriend. I can't see anything coming a mile away.
The last character I have on here is Oki, who is like the swordsman in the area of Kamui. Kamui.
There's also Atome in the Dragon Palace.
Yes,
Atome is a pretty important character.
There's this underwater civilization that lives in this place called the Dragon Palace, which was actually a pretty cool area. I like that spot a lot.
It was neat. I'm afraid of underwater, but it was neat.
I mean, it was it. There's a lot of moments that seemed like, all right, you could have like cut out some of the extra steps here, but overall, it was a really the characters are really interesting. Storyline very simplistic, like we said, but the way Amy gets from point A to point B is where all those characters come in, which is why we're not going to waste our time going through every small little detail of the plot. That would be like a 3-hour long episode if we did that.
When it comes down to it, the body of the game is in the characters. It's in that interplay between all of the different things, like all the plights of the smaller characters and the larger plights of each area folding into, well, Orochi has come back and is the Great Darkness, and now Ninetales is the Great Darkness, and then, no, there's this origin of darkness that we are driving everything back to. But it really brings to light the fact that that kind of massive event does trickle down to everyone.
Oh, that's a cool angle. I never thought about it that way.
Because it's like the way you get Inferno is that a swordsman now can't catch a marlin or a swordfish because his fisherman is gone and all of the fish have been driven away by the water dragon. So you have to fix the water dragon, you have to get a fisherman a fishing rod, and then you get this fish to this fishmonger, who then makes a whole shit ton of sushi, fills your astral pouch if you haven't already done so, and then you get Inferno right on top of that. It's pretty nice.
There's a lot of cool side quests.
That's actually not Inferno. That's one of the Gale Storm ones. I'm wrong, but it's the same plot line.
But the point of it is still valid. Like the big overarching issue is causing a lot of small ripple effects that you then have to solve in order to get more abilities.
Yeah.
What was I going to say? The next thing I wanted to talk about was the boss fights. We talked about how they were all really clever, but I think because there's a couple mini ones in between. There's like you go inside the king's body and you kill a boss inside the king's body, which we don't have to talk about. That wasn't my favorite.
We probably should talk about that just as an example of battle design.
It was so that boss fight. The way it worked is that
one was
you found out it was a possessed sword inside the king, and this enemy manifested outside of it. It was almost like a skull and bones that manifested through this sword. And you had to specifically... Oh, and the sword... There was a bunch of swords in this thing's back.
It was a suit of armor impaled by swords, and then Gold Nail is the one that's possessed. And you find that's what you're actually fighting.
Mm-hmm. And you're supposed to... There's a couple ways to... Basically, you have to get the sword out of him and alone. And once you do that, then you can attack it, and that'll actually do damage to the boss. Mm-hmm. But until then, he's completely invulnerable. It does nothing to it. And... It's pretty well broadcasted at first. Like, you can kind of tell he moves slow, which generally means you have to maneuver around him. Whenever you see a boss moving slow, it generally means, at least from my experience, that you have to attack from behind somehow. Because if they're moving slow enough, that means the game designers are giving you enough time to run around back.
Because Golden Nail is on its back.
And it's one of the swords on the back. So I remember trying to hit it, and it wouldn't work a couple times. And I found out because I wasn't on the pixel perfect spot to hit it. And then later kind of spoiler alert. Well, I'm not going to say spoiler alert anymore.
Yeah,
but
honestly.
you refight a bunch of those bosses at the end, and he's one of the bosses you fight again. And it was a lot easier. And
because
I don't
you
know
knew
why.
what to do.
I knew what to do, but this time I was able to hit him in the back, and I couldn't do that the first time I played, and I don't know why.
I mean, honestly, by the point you get from Blight to...
That's the name of the boss, Blight.
Yeah, the name of the boss is Blight. The actual sword is Gold Nail. I don't know why I remember all of these things, but that's
don't
just
question
something...
it. That's why I have people on who are passionate about the games that we're talking about.
Okay.
You'll remember more than I do.
So that works out. But no, you get back to the Arc of Miyamoto, but you've got to think that Blight was almost halfway through the game, and now you're at the end game. You have stronger weapons, you have better skills, and by that point you actually have all of the brush skills, and if you're like me, at the end of the game, I got that final solar reflector, and I did use it because it looked cool, first of all. It looked really cool. And also, I wanted to be running around with that final weapon and be Shiranui Reborn. But that thing literally wrecks everything in sight. So once you have that, it almost trivializes the game. But even if you were using rosaries, that last one shreds through everything.
It's so nice. It's so fun.
I think either those final gauntlet of bosses were scaled down, and I think they were partially scaled down, but I also think you just have better gear by that point.
I think it's... I don't think it's scaled down. I think it's just doesn't scale. Because you have better gear, so now it's easier to cut through the enemies or through the bosses. So Orochi's an interesting fight. That's the main villain because he has like 8 different heads. You have to take out each of the different heads, and then you have to get him to drink.
That's such a mess.
It's just long. It's not tough. It's just long and tedious. But you basically get each head drunk off this special sake that we were talking about before, the 8 purification sake. Right? Did I remember that? Yes, I got it this time.
You got it. You did it.
And you get each head drunk, and then you attack each head until you take out all its health, and once that's all done, then you beat him. Yeah. I'm simplifying. There's a couple more phases in between there, but that's pretty much the fight. Then you fight Ninetales, which essentially you do enough damage for Ninetales to split into a bunch of tiny little...
tube foxes.
These little foxes, which are fucking annoying to kill because they attack so fast, and there's 8 of them, so it takes forever. 8 is a very common theme.
We're wrong. She does not split into tube foxes. She splits into each of the 9 tails as little incarnations of Rao.
Really?
Yeah. Look it up.
I don't think it was little Rao's, was it?
It was either little Rao or little, like, women. It was not tube foxes. You fight tube foxes inside of the water dragon, though. And the tube foxes are annoying because they steal all your ink. And there are, like, 9 of them, like, bouncing around on screen. They're really bullshit, and they're very obnoxious.
Oh, I know exactly what you're talking about.
The tube foxes are a mess.
No. So with the night, we're gonna focus on like the main core bosses because there's so many.
There's so much going on.
But as long as you kill each of the little priestesses, the little women that spawn out of like doing enough damage, then you'll notice the tails of the 9 tails goes down until there's only 1, and then once you finally defeat that last one, that's when you defeat 9 tails.
Yeah, I like 9 tails because 9 tails has the ability to use her own celestial brush. So if you're not fast enough using your own lightning strike to get to her sword, she will interrupt your strike.
Yeah, it's crazy.
That was pretty fun. But I actually want to cycle back to Orochi because I want to voice a complaint that is not about the game so much as my very odd memory. And I think I've told you specifically about this. Earlier in the episode, I mentioned that my first experience of Okami was the X-Play spot.
Yeah.
My thing about that is that in my warped memory, my 2006 memory of this, I for some reason thought that there was a few split seconds where it shows you the fight with Orochi, the final fight, which I went back and I found it, and I don't know how I thought this because it doesn't do that. So I spent a lot of the game expecting the second fight with Orochi to be different than it was. But no, it's just the same fight.
And you fight him 3 times.
That's too many. That is 2 times too many for the length of that fight. That is my biggest complaint, on top of the fact that because of very warped, strange, made-up memories, I expected something different and was very disappointed.
It is so you defeat Orochi pretty early on in the game, and then you go through literally go back to the past to what happened 100 years prior at one point in the story, and you to fight Orochi again, but you literally do it all over again. It's not an abbreviated version of the fight. You just do the whole fight over again, which is obnoxious. And then the final area of the whole game is a boss rush. You have to defeat Orochi, Ninetales, Blight, and what was the
Crimson
other?
Helm.
Crimson Helm. Blight and Crimson Helm are like main bosses, but they're also not like the main bosses of an area. They're kind of like the mid-level bosses.
Well, Crimson Helm was the main area, or the main boss for
that second area.
Oh wow, I can't remember.
In the Agata Forest.
The Spider Queen's in the Agata Forest.
Oh, you're right, and you do have to fight her as well.
Yeah, you're right. We've been forgetting the Spider Queen this entire time.
She was a fun
How could
fight.
I forget Lolth?
That's a good fight too.
Yeah, that's actually one of the better designed ones. But the boss rush. Wow, I totally lost my train of thought. The boss rush I thought was a little too much, but thematically I don't think they could have taken that away.
No, and I don't have an issue with boss rushes, in general, because Mega Man does it all the time. But I think it wouldn't have been bad if it was just you defeat all the bosses and then you go to the boss rush, you defeat the boss rush, and then you fight the final boss. Like, you beat the bosses throughout the game and then the boss rush. But the fact that you fight Orochi a second time in the middle of the game is just unnecessary.
Yeah.
Excuse me, unnecessary.
Well, here's the problem that I have with Okami is that it's hard to say anything is unnecessary, because when you put it in the context of the plot, it is necessary because it's going back in time and it's showing that you are recreating the
events.
You're going back in time and you are now Shiranui again.
Yeah.
And there's both of them at the same time, but
Shiri. No, I'm just kidding.
Excuse me. I am not a scrub and I know how to pronounce these things. So sit down.
I already am. Come on now.
But no,
sorry.
So in the context of the game, all of these things do fit and they do make sense. And it's infuriating because I think they're just things that could have been chosen better for the sake of the game. It's one of those things where, yeah, it makes sense in the context, but at the same time, it's like, couldn't you have thought of something better?
Oh, well, the reason I was saying, like, storyline wise, it was not unnecessary to have Orochi there again. It was just unnecessary to fight him again. If they would have shown that in either A, a cutscene, or B, just a different version of the fight, I would have been 100% okay. And I don't mean just like slightly different. I mean like completely different.
Yeah.
But they didn't do that.
Yeah.
So
that's fair.
We got to start wrapping this up because we've actually been going on for a pretty long time now. We're at almost up to an hour 10 now.
Oh Lord.
So no, this is I love this. This is why I love doing this. It's only, and I would actually keep going if I wasn't really hungry.
Same.
I'm getting really hungry. So to kind of wrap this all up, we've talked about the art style, we've talked about the story, we've talked about the gameplay, all the different brushes, all the different the weapons you get. We've talked about the different bosses. Let's talk about the music a little bit, and then
beautiful.
Yes. Actually, you know what? There we go. There's the music now.
Yeah, honestly,
it is a good soundtrack.
It's such a
it is
good
legitimate.
Soundtrack.
It's very it sounds like a classic it's very Japanese and it's very beautifully done.
There are very few games that I feel really nail the aesthetic they go for. I think my pinnacle of this is Darkest Dungeon, because Darkest Dungeon picks that like hard gothic theme and sticks to it and drives it into your brain. Okami also does this. There are a few points where I feel like it falls away a little bit, mostly just because of Like Waka does that for me because Waka's talking in like that weird like
he speaks
cool
in French.
dude French.
Yeah, it's weird.
He's very odd, but then like even that gets clarified because he's literally a celestial from a different world. Why he's speaking French from that, I don't know.
He's the celestial from France. Clearly.
Okay, fair. The celestial plane is France. The world is Nippon. Celestial plane
he's
is
from the France part of the celestial plane. I'm just making this stuff up.
Yeah, fair.
Go
All
on.
right, fine.
I'm just making it up.
But the thing with Okami is that it did take that Japanese theme and it held to it because it kept the mythology in its own right. It kept the woodblock style with the watercolor and the brush strokes and the music with its like classic old Japanese feel. It really takes that, wraps it up, and puts a bow on it.
And they use the right music for the right scenarios. When it needs to be beautiful, it's beautiful. When it needs to be grand and sweeping, it's grand and sweeping. And when you're in the fight music's pretty good. It's very intense. Like, it's not something I would necessarily listen to outside of the game.
I mean, I do.
But it worked perfectly for what it set out to do.
And like there's even those little eerie bits that you've got that weird plucking of the strings like that. There's no other music except for just that little bit of plucking. And it's like, wow, they really held on to that. There's so much of this game that just really loves its theme, and the music just really encapsulates that. I am a huge proponent of a video game is amplified by its music. You can do so much for your game by keeping to the musical theme. Metroid Prime does the same thing, where that is a game that had an idea and it hammered that home with the music. Some do it with visuals, some do it with the music. Okami does it with both.
Metroid is a series in particular that does it well with almost every incarnation of it. Metroid Prime, Super Metroid, Original Metroid, it's all really good. But no, I agree with you 100%. This game picks an aesthetic, it nails it perfectly, and then it has the whole, and even the story fits into the aesthetic. It's not just... For example, like, this isn't a criticism of it, but Sly Cooper picks an aesthetic and it goes for it. The story doesn't have any bearing on the aesthetic. And that's not a bad thing. It's just, it's different. Okami, everything fits into the aesthetic. The story is part of the aesthetic, which each part of the aesthetic informs the other part. The art style informs the music, which informs the story, which informs the art style. And it's a cyclical thing. Yeah.
A lot of games forget how important music is. And the thing is that if you have a killer art style, you have a killer story, and you wrap that up, but you forget the bow that is the music, you've still only got 2/3 of an excellent game. Because the music is something that you are not aware that is there until it's gone. If your game glitches and suddenly there's no music, what's the first thing you notice is where was the music in that scene?
I mean, well, if a game glitches and you don't see anything, you're going to notice that too.
Yeah.
To be fair.
But there's so much evocation that can be done with music. Think of how horror does it. The sound effects in horror. On it. The sound is just such an important thing. It's as important as visuals and gameplay. And there are games that just totally forget that that's an important aspect. And just because like I have it written down, like even with the Kami, it keeps up with the theme of the Japanese mythology, because I have a couple of favorites where like the Oni in Japanese mythology are the classic ogre mask demon, and they keep up with that with they're the ones with the masks of stone, and they charge at you. Yeah. They kept up with that, but they had the stone mask, and then when you break it away, it's that classical Oni mask face. But there were ones like the Wayando with the flaming wheel with the human head. They did all of those with like the lips, the nose, the eye. Ear was another one. There were the Tengu, which were actually pretty close to their final like thing. But my favorite were the blockheads and the moving walls.
Yeah, they were funny
Those are
too.
An actual thing in Japanese mythology. They're called nirikabi, which are a mobile wall that just blocks travelers. They're just nonsense. That is a thing that they didn't make that up on the fly. You'd play that game and you'd think they did, But nope, that was an actual random yokai that the Japanese actually had.
That's kind of funny.
And it's just like, wow, that thing that seemed out of place, nope, that was a real thing.
All part of it. So to kind of wrap this up, overall, the game, we're going to end it on this note, actually. We were talking about aesthetic. That's the thing that this game nails. The game is fun. Not taking anything, but it nails the aesthetic. So we're going to end it on this. So one of the things Kamiya that inspired Kamiya to create the game was his hometown nostalgia. After moving to the city, he yearned to return home so he could, After moving to the city, he yearned to return home. So he created a game, which this nails the aesthetic too. Besides what I said before, which was glistening and beautiful, his other aesthetic that he was trying to nail was the natural beauty of the Japanese countryside.
Which is
right there. That's it. It hits it.
You get literally everything.
So, I think that's enough of a final word for us to say, go fucking play this game, because it's really good. I thoroughly enjoyed it. It wore out its welcome for me a little bit. It is a 30-hour-ish game, but I think part of that was for me because I was trying to play a bunch of games for this summer of PS2. So I had a little bit of anxiety on my mind trying to get through the game because I knew I had a lot more to play and to do. But if I didn't have that, I mean, I still enjoyed the hell out of it. And if I didn't have that, I think I would have enjoyed it even more.
It is definitely, I'm going to be real. It's not one of my top 5 favorite games. It is an experience I'm glad to have. Mm-hmm. There are definitely things it could have done better. There are things that it did excellently. It is a game that I think is a marvel of its time and has continued to stand the test of time. It is a game that is aging gracefully, and it's holding up to what it wanted to do, and that has not failed it in any way, other than things like Isun being a smarmy bitch.
He's just such an annoying character.
So bad. He's so bad. I just appreciate that every little bit mattered, and even so much as the title of the game was picked with importance. Okami is kind of a twofold title, because I think it's katakana. The katakana for Okami can either, depending on how you spell it in Japanese, can either mean wolf or it can mean great deity. The game actually uses the spelling in Japanese. It uses the great deity spelling. But when you think of it twofold, it's a great deity wolf, which is exactly what the game is. And I think that little tiny bit of detail pushes it right over the edge of a game that really focused on its theme. Mm. And I just love this game. I really appreciate it.
It is truly a fantastic game. To wrap this all up, Brenna, do you have any social media things you want to plug or anything like that?
No, probably not, because I'm a furry and I don't really feel like getting harangued on Twitter.
Fair enough. As usual, you can follow me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at StillLoadingPod on all of them. You can also reach out to me, stillloadingcontact@gmail.com. If you want to support the show and want to see me continue to grow, please consider checking out my Patreon. That's patreon.com/StillLoadingPod. Even just $1 a month will help me grow the show to hopefully doing more than one episode a week, though I know right now for the summer of PS2, it is every episode. There is an episode every week. I can't continue to keep up that pace right now. It is exhausting, but this has been a ton of fun. And check out the network I'm a part of, the Podbeard Network. You can go to podbeardnetwork.com to check out all the shows we have. And that should do it. So, Brenna, thank you once again for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
This was a fun episode, and I hope you all enjoyed it, and I will see you all next time.
He heads for the biggest dump in town, Scumbag Alley. lands at the intersection between bad and wrong. At least the scumbags kept the place clean. There he is, the oldest scumbag of them all, Gershel. They always said old Gershel wouldn't go without a fight.